Hi everyone, my name's Monica and I post about fashion, art, and stuff like that. And today I wanted to talk about music. My past few videos have mostly been about like fashion and clothes, so I just kind of want to switch it up today and talk about some music that I've been enjoying recently. I mostly use Spotify to listen to music, but I also love to collect CDs because I'm a big enthusiast for physical media, and I hate the fact that phones have like basically completely wiped out the need for magazines, books, and like things that you can hold in your hand other than your phone. So yeah, I love buying physical things because I feel like it just makes me so much more happy in a way that my phone can never. And so I have a little collection of CDs right here. I set up a little stereo system in my room just because I was bored of listening to music with my phone, and it was really easy to do. Like, I thrifted the actual CD player, and then the other parts I got pretty cheap off eBay. And what I love about mine is that it has like 5 discs in it, so I can just switch them out whenever I want. My dream CD player is the Bang & Olufsen Biosound 9000, and it's literally so cool because you can hang it on the wall and then you can see like the actual CDs like churning from like each like station it's at or whatever. It's literally like a work of art. Like, it looks so cool, especially for like interior design, but it's also like $4,000. So that's why I said it's my dream one, because I could never. Maybe one day, but for now my Sony one does perfectly fine. Anyways, this isn't my whole collection of CDs. I have a lot more, but this is just a specifically curated collection that I sort of had a concept for because I wanted to show y'all music that is specific to what I envision a cool girl to be. So, cool girl music. What is cool girl music, you ask? Well, I think that's very open to interpretation. I think everyone has their own definition or image of a cool girl in mind. To me, cool girl is more of an abstract feeling I get rather than like a specific person. And I get that feeling whenever I listen to certain bands or music. I start to do this weird thing where in my head I visualize myself being part of the band or the artist, and I'm the singer and I'm singing the song and the crowd's going crazy and I'm like on the guitar and I'm like playing really cool and everyone thinks I'm cool and awesome. And maybe that's because I'm delusional or I maladaptive daydream too much, but that's how I know when I think something is cool, is when I start to like get a little crazy in the head about it. And that's what cool girl music is to me. It's music that I like so much that I start to feel like a cool girl. Not saying that I am, it's just like a feeling I get whenever I listen to music. But yeah, so I picked out 11 albums. They're all mostly from the 90s and 2000s because that's like my favorite era of music. But yeah, I'm just gonna share with y'all some of my favorite songs from the albums, the cultural impacts behind them, and the significance. The important part is that these are all female-led bands and vocalists. It just has to be that way. I've never felt more like a cool girl than when I'm listening to music sung by a cool girl. I just feel like female vocals can be so powerful and underrated, especially in a rock genre. People tend to gravitate towards more men vocals for screaming and stuff, but I feel like female vocals just like do it differently, and you really just have to open your mind to it, especially if you're a guy listening to this. Like, I feel like guys always get so weird whenever they listen to like female rock bands because they think it makes them like feminine. But yeah, I'm gonna stop talking and get into it. Please subscribe if you like this video, and I hope you like this video. Okay, so we're starting off with a classic and also one of my favorites, which is Evanescence, The Open Door. My dad did play a lot of genres for me growing up, but it mostly leaned towards the nu metal side, and so I was always listening to bands like 9 Inch Nails and 3 Days Grace, just like those classic 90s dad rock bands. But the one I always loved the most, and the one I still listen to even to this day, is Evanescence. I mean, I think everyone knows this band, and if you don't know this band, then you at least know that one song. Bring Me to Life is such an iconic song from a time period where female-fronted bands were sort of looked down on. And I say rock band very loosely because that's more of like an umbrella term for it. They definitely fall under more of like a pop category, and I would argue that's why most of their songs are very catchy and like get stuck in your head. The negative thing with catchy music, and my take on it, is that it can get pretty boring pretty fast. Like usually if I immediately like a song, that usually means it's really easy to listen to, and that's a good thing. But if I start to listen to it like again and again, it just gets very like tiring, and you know, like nothing really interesting happens with it. And I would say a lot of the songs from their first album, Fallen, I'll probably never catch myself listening to them again just because of how overplayed and popular they became. But there's definitely still a few B-sides on there that I love and will always try to sing at the top of my lungs. This band was definitely like the gateway band to me liking more heavier music with a lot of rock influence. And I also think that's the same for a lot of people. I've heard a lot of people say that Evanescence was sort of their awakening, but I've always preferred their second album to their first one because there's just so much more flavor to it, and obviously they had to pay more attention to it with the success of their first album, Fallen. But like the attention to detail with this album is crazy. Like whenever I listen to it with my headphones, it takes me to another dimension. In my opinion, I think this is their magnum opus. It's them in their prime. It has the perfect balance of angst, emotion, and musicality. It's beautiful. Like I've cried to this album, and I've cried harder because I watched her sing it live on YouTube, and her vocals are so raw and impactful. If I were to recommend two songs to someone who's never listened to this album, I'd probably recommend Lithium and also Lacrimosa. They're both beautiful, beautiful tracks. But my personal favorites are Your Star and Sweet Sacrifice. Also, I should probably mention this now, but I made a Spotify playlist of all the songs I mentioned in this video, so if you want to go check that out, go check that out. I'll leave the link in the description. And it's not all just like alternative rock music. I listen to a lot of different genres. There's some Beyonce in there, there's some K-pop songs in there. So yeah, I think cool girl music is very much like everywhere, and I just wanted to compile it all into a playlist. So yeah. Okay, so next up we have No Doubt, Tragic Kingdom, and also Return of Saturn. These are two bands that my dad also did play for me growing up a lot. I remember always watching the music videos to them, and I would just like stare at them in fascination. In a way, I feel like No Doubt is very underrated. Not in the sense that like Just a Girl or Don't Speak or Gwen Stefani was underrated, but like their other stuff, because I feel like there's a lot more to the band than just like the popularity of it. In a way, I feel like everyone has general knowledge about No Doubt, but nobody really like takes the time to actually listen to their other stuff. I'm not gonna lie, that was also me. Like I didn't really get into them until recently. I found Tragic Kingdom while I was shopping for CDs, and I was like, oh yeah, Just a Girl, like I like that song. And so when I turned it on, like I listened to all the songs, and I was like, wow, like this is actually really good music. Like I didn't know this existed. Like I did, but I didn't, you know what I mean? So it was really just like an eye-opener for me. And then just out of like genuine curiosity, I started looking more into the band's history. And then from there, I learned that they started out as a ska band, and they were basically like the beginning of the third wave of ska, with bands like Sublime and Rancid becoming more popular. And that just made me appreciate how intricate and stylized their music has become. Tragic Kingdom definitely ventures away from like complete ska music, but it still has that like soul and style of ska and also punk. And it's just a lot of songs on here that make you feel like a rebellious teenager, and it's just a very youthful spirit to them. The song Sunday Morning from this album is one of my favorite songs in the whole world. I literally bought a bass and learned how to play bass just so I could play the bass line from Sunday Morning. I'm not even kidding, like let me show y'all. But yeah, I never get tired of that song. I never get tired of this album in general. But their follow-up album, Return of Saturn, I think I like just a little bit better. I think there's like a pretty common phenomenon whenever bands get popular from like one album, that it creates a lot of pressure for them to produce something that's either going to be safe and that the fans will probably like, but it'll also probably be boring, or something new and experimental with the new budget that they got and also take that sort of risk. And the latter is definitely what happened with Return of Saturn, and it also happened with Evanescence too. Like I said, it happens a lot. And the negative thing with that is that if they do anything different from what they did in their previous album, that they're probably going to lose followers from people who only liked their music for one specific reason, and that's definitely what happened with this album. It was highly underlooked and just not as appreciated as Tragic Kingdom, even though it was, I think, just as great. I'm gonna be honest, when I first listened to this like all the way through, I kind of thought it was boring and I didn't really understand it. And I think what happened was I went into it thinking it was going to be like Tragic Kingdom, very upbeat, and their main song for it, Ex-Girlfriend, actually was very upbeat and very like unpredictable. It had so many twists. It's a great song, and let me tell you, Gwen Stefani knows how to write a really, really good breakup song, so that's another thing that just made it equally as better, is it's very relatable. Anyways, it was very much a song I expected out of No Doubt, but what I didn't expect was for the rest of the B-sides on the album to almost like have a serious tone to them, and it just made you feel very introspective about it, and that definitely threw me off. Like, there's a very big difference between these two albums. Not only is it them growing more as artists and maturing more, it's just like a total vibe change. Like, all of a sudden this youth and innocence conveyed in Tragic Kingdom gets turned into this like very melodramatic and angsty, bittersweet type of music, but that also makes sense considering there was a pretty large gap between these two albums. I'm not sure how long it was, but I know it was like more than a year. I think the thing that turns people away from this album is that you really need to give it time to grow on you and sort of build a relationship with it. If you give it the time, it starts to become so much more layered and complex, and in return that just makes it so much more addicting and also rewarding to listen to. If I were to recommend two tracks to someone who's never listened to this, I would definitely say Bathwater and Simple Kind of Life, but my personal two favorite are Comforting Lie and also Home Now. I disagree. It's kind of funny because whenever I say I like Poppy, people always look at me like I'm crazy. And like, I get it. I think a lot of people recognize her more as like that one creepy YouTuber.
Hi, it's me, Poppy.
But I also feel like a lot of people just don't know in general that she makes music. I think one of the reasons why I do love her music so much is just because of how well produced it is. And also she's always doing something different. Like, every album she has, there's a totally different genre, a totally different way she sings the song, but what remains consistent is the quality, and also the execution of concept is just always on point. And this album right here, I think, is the most quality, like pure art thing I think she's ever put out. I believe it won a Grammy nomination, and I know that that one bald guy who reviews music on YouTube rated this an 8, which to his standards means it's a really good album. This album came out 4 years ago and was Poppy's first real dive into metal music. It's not just straight up metal, there's a lot of twists and turns in this album, a lot of genre switches, so like, if you think you're not gonna like this, just give it a chance, because it's not just like, you know, crazy screaming metal music. Although that was one of the main like critiques from this album, was that it was too messy, but I think a lot of people just like kind of throw that term around loosely and don't really understand the music. And I even admit too, like, a lot of the songs on here really confused me at first, and it wasn't until like I forced myself to listen to it more that I started to appreciate the transitions in the albums and how crazy it was, and it just became really pleasant to listen to once I got over that like initial listening experience. I'm the type of person, like, if I don't like something from the first listen, it really bothers me, because I'm sort of like, what am I missing? Like, this was obviously created for a reason, like the producers worked really hard on it, and this was, you know, other people listen to it and like it, so like, what am I missing? So yeah, I usually just like to challenge myself and try to understand something even if I don't like it at first. And I've also learned to really never trust my first impression on stuff. This album conveys like such intense emotions, anger, resentment, and all stuff like that gets like projected into her screams, and I love that she screams more. To me, it's literally like the definition of female rage, and I can relate to it and feel it so much more better than like male vocalists. So yeah, I definitely appreciate how she experimented with her vocal range on this. This album is also such a roller coaster to listen to. If you have the time, I definitely recommend you listen to it from start to finish, because obviously like that was the way it was intended to be listened to, but also you can tell that like the people who made this really took the time to curate it, like specifically sort of like as a story. Yeah, it just builds up really so good. And you may not like it, and that's okay, but the one thing you can't say about it is that it's not interesting, because there's nothing boring about this. It's definitely like a wild ride. I know that within this album there's a whole lot of lore regarding her own personal life, and I don't really like digging into that type of stuff anyway, just out of respect for the artist, but I do know that this album is something created out of the pain and anger of escaping a abusive relationship, so it's definitely just a projection of, you know, Poppy's emotions during that time, but it did really make for a really intense and beautiful album. If I were to recommend two songs from this album that are generally easy to listen to or just appreciate, I'd say I Disagree for sure, and also Blood Money. but my personal favorites from this song are Sit Stay and also Bite Your Teeth.
You're better than I wanna be. Don't think 'cause I understand. I can't.
Okay, so next up we have Sneaker Pimps, Becoming X. This is another band from the 90s, and I admit I'm not too familiar with their whole discography, especially outside of this album, but that's also because their legacy was very short-lived. I think this album was basically their artistic peak of creation. It's what they're mostly known for, and for a good reason too. Like, it's a really, really good album. It's been described as a trip-hop album with a blend of darker instrumentals, and the lead vocalist, Kelly Alley, has such like an ethereal sounding voice that the contrast of it really gives it such a cinematic feeling to it. So whenever I listen to it, like, I feel like I'm in a movie or something. I think the actual composition of the sound has to be what made this album stand out so much though. There's just so many background noises and things going on that like you can't really like consume it all in one go. It's definitely like something that you have to keep listening to, but it's also just like ASMR. That's how like pleasing it is to listen to it. It just like really like makes my ears tingle in a good way. It's definitely one of those albums that fits the vibe of like driving on a late night with your windows rolled down. I don't like driving, so I'd probably never do that, but I do love listening to this album and just staring at a wall. It makes for really good dissociation music. But yeah, I think the reason why this became their most successful album and why they never became more popular, even though like they had the potential to, is because they actually kicked Kelly Alley, the lead vocalist, out of the band like a couple albums into the band's journey. And that's definitely what happens when you don't grow organically as a band and you're placed together by a larger record company. It becomes so like forced, and chemistry is so important, especially in bands. I don't know what happened between all the members for them to kick her out of the band. I think it was probably just a disagreement of artistic direction. As soon as she was kicked out of the band, nobody really wanted to listen to them anymore. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it happens. But I think this album in itself makes up for that absence because, in my opinion, I'd rather have one really good album than like 3 mediocre albums. If I were to recommend like 2 specific ones to someone who's never listened to it, I'd probably recommend Six Underground and Low Place Like Home. But my other personal favorites from this album are Tesco Suicide, Walking Zero, and also Postmodern Sleaze. So next up we have Cibo Matto, Stereotype A. This is an album that I love just because of how fun and like unserious it is. This band in general knows how to create music that's very charismatic and interesting. I noticed that their music is definitely like a lot more upbeat and happy than the music that I listen to. So whenever a song plays by them in my playlist, it's definitely like a nice contrast compared to the music that I usually listen to. Something unique about this band is it was formed by 2 Japanese women, Yuka Honda and Miho Hattori. I think both of them are insanely talented, and whenever I listen to them, it just really inspires me knowing that like this is authentically an album made by them.
I think we're confusing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think people really want to describe you in one sentence, and I think that's difficult with us because we don't really do something that a lot of other people do. So they try to find something that's closest and round it off.
Right.
This album came out in the late 90s, a time where I feel like artists such as Bjork, Gorillaz, Radiohead almost had the privilege to be able to experiment with their sound and still have a fan base. I feel like TikTok has absolutely destroyed people's ability to search for music as an art and not as some redundant trend. I'm not saying creative music like this doesn't exist anymore, because it does. It's just harder to find, and I also find that people don't appreciate it as much as it should be, which is really sad. But yeah, if I were to recommend 2 songs from this album and you've never heard it, I'd probably say Flowers and also Spoon.
Pretend you're anything, just to be adored with what you need.
The next album is from Garbage, and this is their self-titled album, and it's also their debut album. I just recently found out about them, and the way I did was because I was thrifting, and I always make sure to check the CD section just in case I find something cool. And I saw this album, and I just really liked the color of it, and I thought the band's name was also really unique. Garbage. And so from there I learned that this was actually a really popular 90s band and it was so influential for its time, and I'm like, how did I not know about this? The lead singer of this band, Shirley Manson, she's literally the definition of cool girl. She was also part of another band called Angelfish before she joined Garbage, and she was really awesome in that one too. And also someone pretty important in this band, a guy named Butch Vig. He was a producer for a Nirvana album and also a Smashing Pumpkins album, which is just like a crazy achievement. And knowing that means that like this album is already gonna be like really good because of how legendary that producer guy is. I suppose this is what you would call an industry plant band, and of course that has a negative connotation with it, but I think in this rare case it like actually worked out, and all of the band members already had the necessary skill and talent to form a really good band, and luckily their chemistry worked together, so you know, like why not? So yeah, the actual credibility of Garbage is really impressive. It's sort of like if a shoegaze band met with a pop artist, met with like a grunge band, and they all slept together and had a baby, like this album would come out. I think the two tracks I would definitely recommend is Stupid Girl and also Super Vixen, but I also really love My Lover's Box. Okay, so this one is from Broadcast and it's a CD called Work and Non-Work. And yeah, they've been described as a psychedelic, like 60s pop band. Their sound is just so bittersweet and mysterious. Like whenever I listen to this, it feels like I'm on a train ride and it's a little rainy outside and I'm watching the world pass by through the window, and you know, just like it makes me want to go on a train really bad for some reason. It has a specific type of angst. It's not angry or loud, but instead it's very lush and moody. In a way, it sounds very cold and detached, but not in a bad way. I just think it gives it like a very intoxicating feel to it. I also love that this album focuses more on instrumentals. It's not all vocal centered, so that really leaves more time to shine for the production, and so it's just really nice to have that sort of break from, you know, constant singing. But again, it's like a nice balance between the two. I don't think this collection of work is anything groundbreaking or innovative, because it definitely is reminiscent of Portishead and Stereolab. And if you don't know those bands, those are basically the OGs of this type of genre. But even though it does branch off of them, it still has its own like distinct flavor. My favorite two tracks from this is The Book Lovers and also Message to Home. Okay, so the next album I have is from a band called Jucifer. This is a band formed by a duo, and Amber Valentine, she's the vocalist. She is like such a badass. Like I really admire her. She also plays the guitar. And then the other band member is Edgar Livingood. He plays the drums and he also just does like a bunch of other instrumental stuff. This is their debut album, and it's also the most different they've ever sounded in their whole entire discography. They've been described as sludge metal or noise metal, but surprisingly their sound in this album is very melodic and sort of like lullaby-esque, but more of like in a sinister way, so it's kind of creepy sounding, but it's very interesting. It's very much like a nice balance between heavy and light, and some quiet moments and some loud moments. 1 second the singer's whispering like a very sweet and soft melody in your ear, and the next second she's like screaming really loud, so it goes from 0 to 100 pretty fast. It's just like a really nice authentic sound, and there's nothing commercial about it. But yeah, I think the two songs I would probably recommend is Superman and also Long Live the King, but my personal favorites are Nickel Roll and Code Escovedo. The next album is from Esthero, and it's her album called Breath from Another. So like Sneaker Pimps, this is also an album that was influenced by trip hop, and I guess it's just a genre that I really like. Now that I've discovered it, I've sort of like found myself looking more for bands that are like that, and this was an album that I found, you know, searching for more trip hop stuff. And at first listen, I immediately liked it. There was no question about it that this was a really good album. But in a lot of ways, it's not as dark and like mysterious as trip hop usually is. It's a lot more jazzy and R&B influenced rather than like the usual angst that comes with trip hop stuff. Of course, it's all mostly down-tempo songs, but it's just songs that like put me in a good mood whenever I listen to it. Like, I can imagine this being played in the background of like a trendy coffee shop with $8 lattes. Like, this is that type of album. One of my favorite things in music is hearing very organic sounds mixed with electronically produced sounds. So there was a lot of strings and horns, but there was also a lot of like synths that just sounded really ethereal. So it's really just a good blend of both of those. I think out of all the albums, I'd probably recommend this one the most, just because I feel like it's such an easy listen and you could play it in the car and like it would create a nice ambiance with anyone. So yeah, my favorite songs from this album are That Girl and also Heaven Sent. This next album is from a band called Kittie, and this is their first debut album called Spit. This album has such a special place in my heart because I feel like it's the way that I live my rockstar dreams is through this album. It's just such an authentic 90s girl band, like down to the core of it. It's the literal projection of female rage bundled together with teenage angst. Like, those two things together is just like a really crazy projection of music. It really can't get any more raw and unfiltered than this album, and honestly that was something that I sort of had to get used to. Like, when I first listened to it, I sort of thought the lead singer and the vocals sounded too like close to me. Like, it was very much like above the music, and it did kind of throw me off, but after listening to it more, I did start to see the appeal to it. What I like about this album is it's very straightforward. There's nothing too complicated about the sounds going on, but I feel like their energy and their spunk really makes up for it. In a lot of ways, this album is pretty clumsy, especially with the vocals. Some of the screams sound a little awkward and forced, and the guitar riffs are pretty generic, like 90s nu metal riffs. But in my opinion, there's something very special about a group of teenagers just making music for fun, competing against a very large market of like male saturated vocals during the 90s. So yeah, I just think there's something special about this album, considering how young they are, and maybe also because I'm a girl, and it just makes the inner girl in me happy to hear other girls doing what I wish I could do. Like, the attitude of them is just so relentless and fierce. It just makes me feel so empowered whenever I listen to it. And I feel like this music still stands today because I've noticed like a lot of people my age are listening to this album. Even now, it's sort of like regained popularity. So like, even if it's not well produced or the lyrics are kind of like cringy, it still like has something special to it. Otherwise people wouldn't be listening to it. But yeah, I would definitely recommend you listen to Brackish and also Charlotte. But my favorite tracks from this are Suck and Do You Think I'm a Whore? Okay, so this is a Japanese band called Bleach 03, and in Japanese this album translates to "The head that controls both right and left sides eats meat and slobbers even today," which is definitely a mouthful. I don't really know what it means, but it sounds really cool. So there's definitely like a huge alternative music scene in Japan, and I've definitely like found myself looking for bands there. Like, there's some current ones, there's some ones from the 2000s and 90s, so there's definitely like a really interesting scene there. To say this band is insane is an understatement. It's the complete opposite of subtle. It's very high speed, very noisy, yet it never really gets messy just because of how punctual and precise each of the members are. And also, to top it off, the vocals are some of the craziest I've ever heard. I don't know if it's just like a Japanese thing. I've definitely noticed it a lot more in Japanese music, but their screaming for vocals tends to be a lot more unique compared to just like a normal heavy metal scream. And it's really impressive actually, but you might need to like sort of acquire a taste for it, especially because otherwise it could just come off as like them being weird and making weird sounds. It's not weird in my opinion, but it is something you sort of need to get used to. It is something I do put on only when I'm in a specific mood, just because of how abrasive it is. It can sort of sound obnoxious if you're not like in the mood to listen to it, but when I am in the mood, like, this hits really hard. The bass player does a lot of funky and intricate slap bass playing, and the drummer is extremely fast and precise, and the guitarist also knows how to create a really addicting riff. My favorite tracks, I don't actually know the song names because it's in Japanese and I don't even want to attempt to say it, but it's number 14, the last track, and also I really love number 5. Okay, Okay, the very last album I saved for last because of how unique it is. It's from a band called Midori, and translated, this album is called Nice to Meet You Again, I'm Midori. This is a very obscure and very niche album. But yeah, this is a Japanese hardcore punk band, but they fall under a subgenre of punk called art punk. And honestly, I don't really know what art punk means, but I'm assuming it's because there's a lot of more like detailed instrumentation here. Like there's a double bass and there's also a keyboard person. So there's like more instruments than compared to like a traditional punk band. This is definitely one of those bands you cannot play in front of other people unless you want them to think you're like crazy. I definitely just listen to this on my own time with my headphones on. I honestly can say this is one of the most unhinged and expressive things I've ever listened to. Mariko Goto is the vocalist for this band, and I think she really knows how to scare people with her voice. I think she does a great job at sounding like this cute, like anime girl type of thing, and then all of a sudden she goes into this like blood-curdling scream that sounds like murder. Something I've learned about my taste in music is that I love contrast. I love when things like juxtapose each other and don't really make sense. Could be like the key switching or like crazy transition, but this album has all of that for sure. And I understand this is definitely not everyone's cup of tea, but a lot of people try to dumb it down to just like shock value music, but in my opinion, I don't think this is created out of any intention to like shock people. I think it's just created with like people who really value art and just creating something that other people haven't heard before. I also really love the jazz incorporation. It just sort of adds some tangibility and harmony to all the chaos that's happening with the guitars and with the drums. If you're a person that appreciates the art behind music and not just the convenience, I definitely recommend giving this album a listen. My favorite tracks are track number 2 and track number 3. So yeah, just all around a crazy album. But yeah, that was it for the video. Like I said, there's a Spotify link with all the music I have listed in this video. Also some other music I like in general. If anyone has any music recommendations for me, I'll literally listen to anything. I take music recommendations so seriously because I think it's so interesting seeing what other people's favorites are, and I feel like it tells so much about somebody. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!